Hi everyone, welcome to the BioEdge.
Kudus are antelopes found in Africa, and there are essentially two different groups of kudu species. The first group is the greater kudus, and the second group is the lesser kudus. But kudus in general are fairly remarkable because they penetrate semi-arid country in southern and eastern Africa, but they retain an essentially forest-like coloration pattern in the sense of having extensive white striping on the body. Now, it comes as no surprise when a forest antelope, like a zebra duiker or a bongo, has striping, and that's because striping is a good way to camouflage the body in dappled lighting, where the stripe tends to break up the outline of the animal against a complicated and shady background, and therefore tends to disrupt the outline and and hide the animal in plain sight, as it were. So, in the case of a bongo, for example, which is a relative of kudus, there's no mystery about the functional significance and the adaptive value of a striped coat. But when you see kudus, such as greater kudus in the Kalahari, which is a semi-desert of something like 250 millimeters average rainfall per annum, um, where the animals are moving out in the open in extremely sparsely vegetated terrain. In those circumstances, greater kudus do seem rather puzzling because most other desert or semi-desert antelopes are plain colored to the point in some instances of being bleached. And so one has to ask, well, what is in it for greater kudus to retain the striping pattern characteristic of the Tragolaphid forest ancestor? In the case of lesser kudus are far more ecologically restricted than greater kudus, being restricted to eastern Africa from Ethiopia down into northern Tanzania. But again, lesser kudus live in some of the driest parts of East Africa, and although they do not venture quite as far out into the open as greater kudus do in southern Africa, nonetheless, lesser kudus are characteristic of the Nyika thorn scrub in places like eastern Kenya, places like Tsavo National Park, which are really semi-deserts. And even though they have quite a cover of sticky, thorny, bare-looking shrubs and trees such as Commiphora, nonetheless, they are brightly insulated, brightly sunny environments. And again, it's somewhat puzzling that the full striping of the forest ancestral Tragolaphids remains present in lesser kudus. Now, here at the BioEdge, we've given this problem of coloration a little bit of thought, and we have a working hypothesis to offer researchers. And this invites testing, and that is that although greater kudus are extremely mobile in open landscapes such as the Karoo and the Kalahari, and although they are largely diurnal, what they do is they tend to depend upon the scattered shrubs in the environment for their food, because both greater kudus and lesser kudus are browsers. They're not grazers or herb eaters. They actually depend on woody plants in a semi-arid landscape, and so much of their mobility is the commuting from one isolated woody plant to another to get the browse that they're specialized to eat. And at those times when greater kudus are foraging, they tend to be close to a sticky woody plant with a certain pattern of shade, and they tend in many cases to be partly shaded by that plant. And so if you see a greater kudu out there in the open Kalahari or the eastern parts of the Karoo, chances are, if it's broad daylight, that you'll see the animal partly under the cover of one of these isolated woody plants, which means that its striping is functional in that very limited context. Because these animals are so tightly associated with scattered woody plants, it's almost as if the kudus carry around their own tiny little forest patch with them, as it were. And so in that sense, because they are extremely committed browsers that need to find these taller plants in open environments, it's possible that the camouflage value of the striping remains intact, even though overall kudus have moved from the ancestral forest habitat of the tragolaphins into, in some cases, semi-desert environments today. Now, this explanation is fully adaptive in the sense that we're not invoking any kind of relictual pattern. The alternative explanation is that the stripes on greater kudus and lesser kudus are not actually functional in today's context, and that they're merely ancestral hangovers, a bit like the human appendix is reputed to be, in the sense that they have not been destroyed by evolutionary processes. So there are two ways to look at kudus. You can look at them as having stripes simply because their ancestors had stripes and despite their present environment, and we don't take that view. Or you can look at them as having retained their stripes for a very good modern day adaptive reason, and that is that they tend to forage in micro sites where the striping remains adaptive as a way of camouflaging the animals. And with that note on animal coloration and the beautiful image of greater kudus, which are certainly some of the most marvelous creatures out there to look at, we'll leave you here at the BioEdge, and we look forward to seeing you next time. And it's bye for now.